You know the worst part? It wasn't the photo. It was that no one noticed I was gone. Not even once. I stepped into my parents' house on Christmas Eve, boots dusted in snow, breath still fogging from the cold, and walked straight into the same living room I'd known since childhood. Everything looked familiar. The creaky oak floors, the over-decorated tree, the smell of nutmeg and something citrus roasting in the oven. But none of it felt like it belonged to me anymore. And then I saw it, hung dead center above the stone fireplace, framed in thick walnut wood with a subtle gold trim, was the new family portrait. Large, glossy, professionally shot. A portrait so crisp and proud, it was clear someone had spent time and money on getting it just right. There was my mother, Helen, smiling in her crimson cardigan, like she hadn't spent most of my life sighing at anything that didn't involve my sister. My father, Richard, with his stiff golf course grin, the one that always looks like it hurts to hold. And Vanessa, of course, front and center in a beige sweater dress that probably cost more than my rent, posing like she'd just stepped off a holiday campaign shoot, all soft angles and manufactured laughter. And then nothing. No me. Not even an accidental elbow or a blur in the background. I wasn't shoved to the edge. I wasn't cropped halfway. I was simply not there. It wasn't a bad edit. It was a surgical one. Clean, intentional, deliberate. Like someone had opened Photoshop, selected my entire existence with a perfect lasso tool, and hit delete. I stood there for maybe 5 seconds. Just enough time for my stomach to tighten, but not enough for anyone to ask what was wrong. Or maybe they did notice, and just didn't care. The silence was the same as always. Warm, polite, and completely indifferent. Dinner's almost ready. My mom called from the kitchen, as if nothing had changed. I could smell rosemary and lemon, her signature holiday roast. For a second, it made my chest ache. I used to love that smell. Back when it meant comfort. Back when it meant home. I hung up my coat, muttered a quiet hello, and stepped into the kitchen. Vanessa was there, of course, swirling red wine in a glass like she was hosting a lifestyle segment on seasonal pairings. She kissed my cheek, not really, more like hovered near it, just enough to simulate affection without ever making contact. "You made it," she said, like this was her house and I was late for her event. I didn't answer, just smiled. The kind of smile you give after screaming into your pillow 3 times in 1 week and deciding silence costs less energy. We sat for dinner like we always did, or rather like they always did. My dad carved the roast with exaggerated care, as if we were filming a Hallmark commercial. My mom complimented Vanessa's skin twice and asked about her Barcelona trip. No one asked how I was doing. No one asked where I'd been. The only question I got was whether I still drove that little car, which we both knew was code for, "We've lost track of your life, but here's a vague question so we can pretend to care." I didn't fill in the blanks. I just watched Vanessa unwrap a small velvet box from our parents, a vintage pearl necklace. "It's not much," Mom said, and I had to bite back a laugh because the price tag was still tucked beneath the tissue paper. I caught the number. I'd have to skip rent and groceries to afford it. Oh my God, you guys," Vanessa beamed. "It's perfect." Dad smiled like he'd just bought her a yacht. Meanwhile, my gift was a novelty mug, glossy white. In cheap gold letters it read, "Future CEO." Hilarious. Or tragic. Maybe both. I excused myself after dessert. Said I was tired. Mom offered me the guest room. Not my room. Not even your old room. Just the guest room. Beige sheets, dusty shelf, one lamp that flickered if you breathed near it. I shut the door behind me, turned on the lamp, which, of course, flickered, and sat at the edge of the bed. That's when I pulled out the envelope. Thick ivory paper, sealed. It had been sitting in my bag the whole evening. I had planned to wait until morning, until after stockings and cinnamon rolls and the performance. But after that photo, after seeing myself erased with such grace and precision, I changed my mind. They hadn't forgotten me. No, that would have been mercy. They had removed me, neatly, silently, like bad PR. Like a misstep they hoped no one would remember. Like I was an inconvenient truth better left out of the frame. I didn't sleep much that night. The guest bed creaked every time I turned. The mattress dipped slightly in the middle like it remembered other guests, but not me. I stared at the ceiling while the house settled into its nighttime routine. The familiar hum of the refrigerator downstairs, the occasional soft thud of pipes, and my father's snoring leaking faintly through the vents. Somewhere down the hall, Vanessa laughed. Her practiced, breathy laugh, the one she used for social events and Instagram reels. Everything about this house had the right rhythm, the right lighting, the right scent. Except me. I was the glitch in the algorithm. The envelope sat on the nightstand untouched. I traced my fingers across its edges in the dark. I could have handed it to them at dinner, slipped it beneath a napkin, dropped it on the table after dessert. But it didn't feel right. Not then. Not yet. I wanted the moment to land. To bruise, not just scratch. Morning arrived the way it always did in that house. Too bright, too cheerful, too rehearsed. The scent of coffee and cinnamon rolls drifted up like a marketing campaign for familial bliss. When I finally came downstairs, my mother was plating scrambled eggs like she was auditioning for a brunch magazine. My dad sat at the table, scrolling through his phone, nodding along to nothing. Vanessa was barefoot, sipping almond milk from a wine glass like the irony hadn't registered. "Good morning," my mom said, not looking up. "Hope you slept okay in the guest room." I poured myself coffee. "The mattress has a personality," I said. She laughed like I was joking. I wasn't. We sat and ate, and once again, everyone played their part. My dad mentioned golf. Vanessa talked about her upcoming trip to Barcelona, her third vacation this year. She said something about how lucky she was to have parents who supported her dreams. My mother dabbed the corner of her mouth with a linen napkin and said, "We just want the best for our girls." Girls. Plural. I nodded like a seat filler at an award show. No one asked what I was doing these days. No one asked where I lived. No one asked if I was okay. I let my thoughts wander. I remembered the morning I got my scholarship letter. Not a full ride, but enough. I'd sat at this very table, papers spread out, asking if they could help with the difference. Just a little. My mom had looked at me like I'd asked to borrow her wedding ring. My dad said, "It's just bad timing," and mentioned the bathroom remodel. The one with heated floors and a Bluetooth tub. 2 months later, Vanessa got a brand new car. White leather seats. Custom stereo. A bow on top. She cried when they handed her the keys. Called them the best parents in the world. I was standing next to the recycling bin holding a graduation card with a $20 bill inside. The card read, "You're going places." And you know what? I did. I went to college. I worked 3 jobs. I slept 4 hours a night. I graduated with honors. I moved to a new city. I started over. I didn't ask them for anything after that. And they didn't offer. When I got sick, I didn't call. When I was laid off, I didn't call. When my apartment flooded and I lost almost everything, I didn't call. I bought a used mattress off Craigslist. I made do. Vanessa, meanwhile, was tagging Santorini in her Instagram stories, sipping cocktails on rooftops, sponsored by brands that wanted authenticity. Sometimes I wondered if it was just me. Maybe I was harder to love. Less sparkly. Maybe if I'd worn more beige, smiled more, joined a sorority, played the piano instead of clocking night shifts, they would have noticed me. Maybe if I'd asked louder. Maybe if I hadn't made being fine look so easy. But then I remembered my 8th birthday. I had baked cupcakes. Mom forgot the pizza. We ate cheese slices on crackers. They left early because Vanessa had a dance recital the next day. "We'll make it up to you next year," they said. They didn't. I remembered the time I won the state science fair. The school called home. They replied with a text. "Nice job, smiley face," that was it. No dinner. No framed certificate. No celebration. Vanessa got a shampoo commercial, and they threw her a party with balloons and a cake that read Future Star. So no, it wasn't me. It was never me. The funny thing about being overlooked is that it doesn't hurt all at once. It's not one loud, dramatic betrayal. It's quiet, cumulative, a slow bleed. You don't even realize how much of yourself is gone until you try to stand up and something in you buckles. That's how it was for me. 1,000 small cuts, 1,000 little moments that said, "You don't matter, not as much." I didn't cry when I saw the portrait. I didn't cry over the mug. I didn't cry when no one asked if I was happy. Because the truth is, I had already cried. For years. I used to think I was just more reserved, less demanding. I told myself I wasn't as shiny as Vanessa, and maybe that was okay. Maybe being the independent one was my role. But even the most self-sufficient person still wants to be remembered, still wants to be chosen. Even just once. I remembered the winter I came down with bronchitis during finals week. I was coughing so hard I pulled a muscle in my side. I called home, not for money, just to hear my mom's voice. She said she was busy preparing for Vanessa's art show. "Call me next week, okay, honey?" That was it. No follow-up. No, how are you feeling? I went back to bed, feverish, alone, and told myself I was just being dramatic. When my apartment flooded 2 years ago, pipe burst in the ceiling, everything soaked. I texted my dad a photo of the damage. He replied, "Tough luck. Hope insurance helps." No offer, no check, no visit. I ended up sleeping on an air mattress for 3 months. Vanessa, meanwhile, had just posted a video tour of her new studio loft, "A gift from the universe," she captioned it, though the universe apparently wore my parents' faces. There was a time I thought maybe if I just achieved more, worked harder, earned more, smiled more, they'd notice. So I tried. God, I tried. Straight A's, internships, promotions. I kept showing up to holidays, birthdays, dinners, hoping one day someone would say, "We're proud of you." But the only thing I ever seemed to earn was space in the background. I remembered my high school graduation. Vanessa had a modeling gig that day. They left halfway through the ceremony. "You understand, right?" they said. "She's got momentum right now." I nodded. Of course I understood. I always understood. That was the currency I was raised on, understanding. Making excuses for their absence, their silence, their selective love. They're just tired. They don't know how to show it. Vanessa needs more help right now. I carried those rationalizations around like heirlooms. But the truth? They didn't love her more. They just loved her louder. With confetti and parties and public declarations. With framed photos and Facebook posts. They loved her like a billboard. Me, I was the fine print, the asterisk. I remembered baking my own birthday cupcakes at age 8. I had invited 6 friends. Mom forgot to pick up the pizza, so we had sliced cheese on saltines. The party ended early because Vanessa had a dance recital the next morning. "We'll make it up to you next year," they promised. They didn't. The next year, they were out of town. I remembered the science competition I won at state level. The school called to congratulate my parents. They texted back, "Nice job, smiley face, no dinner, no cake." No mention of it again. A month later, Vanessa landed a shampoo commercial. They threw her a party, balloons, music, a cake that said "Future Star." My name never made it onto frosting. And still I came home for the holidays. Still smiled in group photos. Still brought wine and gifts and awkward small talk. Like a guest in my own story. Hoping, deep down, that maybe this year would be different. But it never was. That Christmas morning, as I sipped their coffee and watched them orbit around Vanessa like she was the sun, I realized something. It wasn't that they didn't see me. They saw me just fine. They had just decided. I wasn't worth the space. I didn't find the truth on purpose. I wasn't digging for dirt or seeking revenge. I was just trying to renew my driver's license. That's how banal it started. I needed proof of address for a new job, something stable, something small. And the DMV, in its infinite bureaucracy, had rejected my online form 3 times. So I went down to the county records office in person, thinking it would be a 5-minute errand, just paperwork, just a formality. But the thing about paper trails is, they lead somewhere. While waiting at the clerk's window, I noticed a man beside me flipping through printed property records. Out of boredom, or maybe instinct, I glanced over and there it was, a name I knew better than my own. Mine, printed in clean, official font on the top corner of a title record. A property address I didn't recognize. At first, I thought it was a mistake. Maybe a clerical error. Maybe someone with the same name. But my curiosity. It has always been the one part of me no one could edit out. I asked to see the file. The clerk hesitated, then handed me the record. There it was again. Diana E. Graves, listed as the sole beneficiary and owner of a house in Montford. A beautiful old queen and home near the park, quiet street, wraparound porch, rent value through the roof. The deed had been transferred 6 years ago. The legal transfer initiated not by me, but by the will of my grandfather, the same grandfather who used to slip me peppermint candies and tell me I was the sharp one, the same man who died while I was still in school and whose estate, according to my parents, had barely covered funeral costs. I stood there, blinking too fast. The words blurred. I remembered that winter, how they told me there was nothing left. A few keepsakes, some furniture. He didn't have much, they said. He didn't want the family to fight over anything. I had believed them. Because I wanted to. I took a photo of the document and spent the next 2 weeks unraveling the rest. Title searches, tax filings, archived email chains from the estate attorney. A few polite, strategic questions to people who didn't know better than to answer. Every thread I pulled led to something dirtier. The house had been leased out for years, 3 tenants, rotating, rent collected monthly, deposited into an account I didn't own. Renovations done without permit, without my consent. Paperwork filed under a business name that linked back to my father. All under the quiet assumption that I would never find out. I didn't confront them right away. I let it sit, let it breathe. Let the truth stretch itself out across my spine like armor. There was a strange calm that came with it, like surfacing from deep water and realizing how long you've been holding your breath. They hadn't just excluded me. They had used me, my name, my silence, my trust, my legal right. The most painful part wasn't the theft. It was the choreography, the ease with which they moved around me, through me, without ever considering that I might matter. It was never forgetfulness. It was strategy. They had written me out of the will not by law, but by action. And they had done it with such confidence. Like I'd never be anything more than a background blur. But I was done being silent, done being polite. I wasn't angry. Not yet. That would come later. First came something cleaner, sharper, something close to justice. So I printed everything, made copies, consulted a lawyer, quietly, had the documents reviewed, notarized, confirmed. The will was airtight. The inheritance was real. The fraud was real. And so was the reckoning. The envelope sat in my bag all Christmas Eve. I could feel its weight whenever I moved. It wasn't vengeance. It was truth. And truth, I've learned, is heavier than people think. Truth doesn't shout. It doesn't chase. It waits. And then it lands. They didn't notice the envelope right away. Of course they didn't. It was just sitting there on the edge of the table, nestled between a coffee mug with a peppermint candy cane and a crumpled ball of wrapping paper from Vanessa's latest unwrapping moment. It didn't sparkle. It didn't shout. It was just thick ivory paper, sealed with a quiet kind of authority, the kind no one respects until it's already too late. I had placed it there deliberately. After breakfast, after Vanessa opened a box containing designer sunglasses, so rare they weren't even in stores yet, after my dad chuckled like he'd just pulled off an insider trade, and my mom dabbed tears from her eyes. We just wanted to surprise her. I stood up, walked to the coat rack, and pulled the envelope from my pocket. No big speech. No drumroll. Just a single line. This is from me. They barely looked. You didn't have to get us anything, my dad said, half laughing, like he expected a joke inside. I smiled. I know. I wanted to. That's when my mom finally gave it her full attention. She turned it over, frowned slightly, then looked to me. Should we open it now? I shrugged. You can. But I'd rather you didn't. So, of course, they opened it. My mom broke the seal slowly, the way she opens wedding invitations from people she barely remembers, but still judges. My dad leaned in, peering over her shoulder. For a few seconds, all you could hear was the sound of paper sliding free, then pages turning, then silence. Not the normal kind, not the breakfast silence or the Vanessa's talking again silence. This one was different, heavy, shifting, like the moment before a chandelier falls. I didn't look up, just stirred my coffee slowly, but I could feel it. The change in air, the pause, the tightening in my father's chest, the way my mother blinked too much, too fast, flipping to the second page, then the third, as if she could flip her way out of it. Vanessa glanced up, confused. What is it? No one answered. Mom. Still nothing. Seriously, what's going on? That was my cue. I figured it was time you knew, I said, setting my mug down. Merry Christmas. My mom looked up, her voice flat. What is this? A copy of Grandpa's will, I said. Calm, controlled. She blinked. We've seen the will. We handled the estate. No, I replied. You handled what you told me was the estate. You never showed me the full will. Just said there were a few keepsakes, that everything went to expenses. I turned toward my dad. That version conveniently left out the property in Montford. You know, the one you've been collecting rent from for 6 years. He dropped the papers like they'd burned his hands. Where did you get this? He asked, voice low. Oh, you know. Public records, title searches, archived emails, a very patient lawyer. I smiled. Turns out the truth isn't that hard to find. Just has to matter to someone. Vanessa stood, confused but rising to defend her turf. Wait, what property? The one by the park, I said. The one you used for that photo shoot last year. Remember? The front porch shot with the pumpkin latte. Her mouth opened, then closed. My mom was already backpedaling. Sweetheart, this isn't what it looks like. That's funny, I said, because it looks a lot like you used my name, my inheritance, and my legal rights to fund your lifestyle while telling me there was nothing left for me. It wasn't like that, she said too quickly. It was complicated. It wasn't, I replied. The will is clear. The house was left to me. Sole beneficiary. Full title transfer. Which means all that rent you collected. Stolen. All those renovations. Unauthorized. My dad rubbed his temples like the truth gave him migraines. I hoped it did. You wouldn't understand, he muttered. You're always so dramatic. That made me laugh. Right. I'm dramatic. You edited me out of a family portrait and committed inheritance fraud. But sure, let's talk about my tone. Vanessa looked like she was still buffering. That house paid for my tuition, she snapped. I know, I said. And the car. And the Mexico trip. And probably that handbag you love so much. That's not fair, she shouted. You never asked for help. You never needed anything. No, I said quietly. I was told there was nothing to ask for, because you made sure I believed that. My mother's voice softened, slipping into that boutique customer service tone she used when returning sweaters. We just didn't think you'd want the responsibility. You were always busy, so far away. I was far away, I said, because you made it clear I didn't belong here. My father pushed his chair back. You need to calm down. And you, I said, turning to him. Need a lawyer. He froze. I'm not suing, I added. Not yet, but I've reclaimed legal ownership. The tenants have been notified. Rent will now be paid to me. Your access is revoked. My mother looked like she might cry. But that house is our income. We depend on it. I tilted my head. Then maybe, I said, you shouldn't have stolen it. Her voice dropped to a whisper. We're family. I stood up slowly. No, I said. You're people I used to be related to. There's a difference. The silence that followed wasn't peaceful. It was thick, charged, the kind of silence that hums in your ears and makes your skin feel too tight. My dad stared at the documents like they might sprout teeth and bite him. My mom's face had gone slack, more from disbelief than shame. And Vanessa looked like someone had yanked the foundation out from under her, but she was still waiting to fall. I picked up my coat. Wait, my mother said, standing suddenly. Can't we at least talk about this? I paused. You just did, I said. For years. Every time you made a decision without me. Every time you left me out. Every time you told me I'd understand someday. I looked her in the eye. I do now. My father stood too, chair scraping against the floor. If you walk out now, don't bother coming back. That stopped me. Just for a second. I turned to face him fully, met his gaze with a steadiness he didn't expect. I think, I said, that's the first thing we've ever agreed on. My mom gasped softly. Vanessa stepped back like she couldn't believe I was actually doing this. But I wasn't angry. Not anymore. I wasn't even sad. I just felt clean, like something had finally clicked into place, like I had spent my whole life twisting myself into the shape of someone they might love. Smaller, quieter, easier, and now I was done folding. I walked toward the door, slowly, deliberately. No one followed. No one called out my name. And maybe that was the most honest moment we'd ever shared. The air outside slapped cold against my face, but it didn't sting. It woke me. I slid into my car, shut the door, and sat for a moment, hands on the steering wheel, heart steady. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I didn't blast music like in the movies. I just breathed, deep, full, like I hadn't in years. Because sometimes the most powerful thing you can do isn't to fight. It's to leave. And leaving was the loudest thing I'd ever done. 3 weeks passed before the first message came through. It was from my mother. Short, polished, hollow. Hi, sweetheart. We think there's been a misunderstanding. Can we chat sometime this week? Hope you're well. Love you. No punctuation at the end. Just love you. Dangling like a loose thread on a sweater that unraveled years ago. I didn't reply. 2 days later, another message. Please don't let this one thing ruin everything. Vanessa is very upset. Your father is trying to stay calm. But you know how he gets when he feels blindsided. Not when he lies. Not when he steals. Not when he erases his daughter from a family photo. No, when he feels blindsided. Poor guy. I said nothing. Then came a voicemail from my dad. I didn't listen to it. Just stared at the notification until the screen dimmed and erased it. The last time he'd call me kiddo was when I offered to help set up his retirement account, and he said, let's leave the money stuff to people who understand it. Right. Like him. Then came the email from Vanessa. You really think this makes you the winner? Fine. Take the house. But don't come crying back when you realize money doesn't buy family. Followed by another one the next day. Mom and Dad are freaking out. They're talking about selling the condo. That what you wanted? Congrats. That one I read twice. Not because I felt bad, but because I wanted to be sure, absolutely sure, of how deeply this had shaken them. The house I reclaimed wasn't just a house. It was the spine of their finances. The rent from the tenants had paid for their mortgage, their vacations, Vanessa's tuition, even according to an old receipt I found. Mom's miraculous skincare routine. Without it, everything was unraveling. And the best part? I hadn't even asked for back rent. Yet, I didn't plan to move into the house. At first, it was just about reclaiming what was mine, drawing a line in legal ink, reversing the erasure. But when I stepped through the front door of the Montfort house for the first time, keys warm in my palm, late winter light spilling across the old hardwood floor, I knew this wasn't just property. This was sanctuary. It smelled like dust and something old, like a book that hadn't been opened in years. But it wasn't musty. It was waiting. The walls carried silence, but not the heavy kind, not the silence of being ignored. This was the kind that made space, the kind that said, "You're allowed to be here. You belong." The house was solid but neglected. Scratched baseboards, faded paint, creaky steps. My parents had taken rent for years, but had done the bare minimum. It didn't surprise me. They never invested in what they didn't plan to keep. So I did what they wouldn't. I stayed. I hired a contractor. I got my hands dirty. I painted the window sills soft sage green and scrubbed the kitchen tile until the pattern underneath emerged like a memory. I cleared out the attic and found boxes full of old furniture they'd stored there, pieces they hadn't bothered to tell me about. Most of it I donated, except for one thing, a navy blue armchair, worn but sturdy. I remembered sitting in it once, when I was little, on Grandpa's lap as he read aloud from a science magazine, his voice low and steady. It was the only thing that didn't feel borrowed. I lowered the rent for the tenants by $50, just enough to show I cared. One of them, a single mother with a toddler, left a thank you note on my mailbox. Handwritten, said I was the first landlord who made her feel like a human being. That note meant more to me than all the love yous my parents had tossed at me like confetti. The house didn't heal me. It wasn't that poetic. But it gave me something I'd never had growing up. Control over my space. My choices. My breath. I stopped checking my phone every hour. I stopped bracing for the next guilt-trip text or passive-aggressive voicemail. I started sleeping through the night. Not the restless kind of sleep where you wake up clenching your jaw. The kind where you forget the world for a while and wake up with sunlight on your face. One afternoon, I found a letter in the mailbox. Real paper. My mother's handwriting on the front. I held it for a long time before opening it, not because I thought it might be heartfelt, but because I wanted to mark the moment. The envelope smelled like her perfume. Inside, 2 pages neatly written full of "we didn't know," and "it wasn't intentional," and "we only wanted what was best for everyone." My favorite line, "You've always been so strong. We didn't realize you needed anything from us." That's what people say when they benefit from your silence, and need an excuse for never asking why you stopped talking. She closed with, "We hope someday you'll come home. Maybe we can start over. Maybe we can be a family again." No mention of restitution. No mention of the years of rent, or the lies, or the photo with my face removed. Just maybe. I folded the letter, placed it in a drawer. I didn't throw it out. I didn't answer. That was the last time she reached out directly. 3 years passed. I didn't reach out. They didn't show up. Every so often, I'd get a message through a cousin, a forwarded email. A Christmas card with no return address, just a plain white rectangle that said, "Thinking of you. Hope you're well." Nothing else. No apology. No ownership. Just a ghost tapping lightly on the window. And drifting away when I didn't answer. I bumped into my old neighbor from Asheville at a bookstore last winter. She asked if I was still managing that house on Chestnut Street. I smiled. "I am." She hesitated a moment, then said, "I heard your parents had a rough time of it." I didn't say anything, just nodded. "Well," she said, tilting her head, "you look happy." And I was. I still live in that house. Not because I have to, not out of spite, but because it's mine. Peaceful, full of light. I wake up to birdsong, not footsteps outside my door. I make my coffee without hearing passive-aggressive sighs about how I never call anymore. I rebuilt the backyard garden, painted the front steps. The windowsills are now full of plants that thrive on sunlight and low expectations. Just like me. There's a photo on my mantel. Just one. It's me, standing in front of the house holding the keys. I'm smiling, not the kind I used to wear like a mask, but the quiet kind. The kind that says I'm here. I made it. No one else is in the shot. No one needed to be. It's my favorite photo, because no one had to crop anyone out. I used to wonder what closure would feel like. If it would come in the form of a dramatic apology or some grand gesture that made up for all the birthdays, the awards, the missed chances. But closure, I've learned, doesn't always knock. Sometimes. You build it, brick by brick, silence by silence, breath by breath. I'm not angry anymore. I don't replay the conversations in my head. I don't imagine them begging for forgiveness or knocking on my door with tears in their eyes. I don't need that. I already have what they never gave me. My name. On something permanent. My place. In the world. My story. Told in my own voice. I used to believe that if I just tried hard enough, earned enough, loved enough, maybe one day they'd love me like they loved her. But love, the kind that matters, isn't something you audition for. It isn't something you buy with good behavior and silence. It's something you're given freely, or not at all. What they gave me was conditional. What I gave myself was everything else. So no, I don't miss them. I don't want to go back. I don't wait for the phone to ring. I have a front porch that catches the morning sun, a blue armchair that fits just right, a garden that blooms quietly, stubbornly with no audience, and a life finally lived in full color, no cropping required.